Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be discussing the criminalization of poverty in America. I'm Mario. I'm joined with Tyler and Alex. We're going to be popping in a second. So moving forward to our table of contents, I want to talk about what we're going to be going over today, which is our introduction and literature review, the problem of criminalization of poverty, the current situation of America, the call to action, and then most importantly, we're going to wrap up with our conclusion. So jumping into the next slide, we're going to talk about the introduction, and I'll pass on to Tyler.
Okay, so for the introduction, the first thing to do is define what we actually mean by the criminalization of poverty. And essentially what that is it describes how legal measures disproportionately target the poor for their actions that stem directly from their financial struggles. And within our paper and presentation, we are going to be highlighting three specific points within the criminalization of poverty. This being anti-homelessness laws, the bail system, and the probation system within America. For previous literature reviews, one study has kind of outlined the legal system as a system that penalizes people not strictly based off of their actions, but also based off of their inability to fulfill monetary obligations as well. Um, Also, many cities in the US have implemented anti-homelessness laws, which punish fundamental survival behaviors from the poor, such as sleeping outdoors and living in their vehicles, which they have no other alternatives to. And then studies have also shown that cash bail systems or probation-related fines, uh, these also disproportionately affect the poor, and it leads to a continued cycle of financial debt. And then moving on to defining more about the problem of the criminalization of poverty. So first, the anti-homelessness laws. Again, this disproportionately affects the poor by, I guess, punishing survival behavior, which the poor kind of have no other alternatives to do. Also, there's some systemic inequalities with these laws as well. And from our research, it shows that specifically the Black and Latinx communities face citations at higher rates. Also, these policies are ineffective and costly, and it kind of brings the attention away from providing housing for the low income, for example. And then moving on to the bail system, in a study conducted in 2016, about 434,000 people in the United States were sitting in jail, not because of a crime, but simply waiting for their trial to start. And actually, there was another study where 13% or sorry, where those who cannot pay bail are 13% more likely to be convicted, not strictly because of their actions, but rather because if they are unable to pay their bail, they're more likely to plead guilty to end their incarceration. And lastly, the probation system relies on collecting fees, which again disproportionately burdens the poor. And failure to pay supervision, drug testing, or monitoring fees can lead to financial struggles. And again, there are some private probation companies that profit from this structure, and this raises social and ethical concerns. And then to pass it on to Alex.
All right, hello everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the current situation going on in America right now. And so to first talk about homelessness laws, and across the U.S., these laws are widespread but vary state by city. And 48 states have at least one law criminalizing activity, like panhandling, loitering, or camping in public. And some states like Tennessee have extremely harsh laws, making public camping a felony. And other states like Rhode Island and Illinois have gone the opposite route, implementing the Homeless Bill of Rights to protect civil liberties. And then a major issue is a lack of federal protection. Recently, Supreme Court overturned a key precedent in the Grants Pass versus Johnson case. And now this allows cities to penalize public camping even when no shelter is available. And although federal agencies like the HUD recommend the housing first track strategies, they lack enforcement power, which results in inconsistent protections and continued punishment of homeless individuals for survival-based behavior. And then talk a little bit about the bail system. The federal bail system focuses on flight risk and public safety, but cash bail is much more common at the state level, and this affects low-income individuals. And this creates a wealth-based detention system, and so people who can go afford bail go home, and poor individuals continue to remain incarcerated despite the seriousness of these charges not mattering. And many of these low-income defendants are just forced to uh, plead guilty just to get out of jail because they don't really have a choice. And then to talk a little bit about the probation system, probation has become a financial burden, uh, especially for like lower level offenses. And people are often charged for mandatory programs, supervision, and even income monitoring. And then probation violations often result from technical issues like missing an appointment or failing a drug test, not new crimes. Yet these still lead to jail or prison time. And then in some states, 25% of prison admissions come from probation or parole violations. And then so some data also shows some racial disparities in who is placed on probation and how strictly it is enforced, particularly among Black individuals. And then so now moving on to Mario for the next slide.
So now we're going to jump into the call to action. The first thing I want to talk about is the anti-homelessness laws, which is the most important part um, of the first part of the section. So the top three things I want to talk about was enacting Homeless Bill of Rights, the shift from punishment to support and reform law enforcement practices. So I wanted to talk about the push for homelessness bills of rights in the state level. These laws will ensure that housing status doesn't prevent someone from accessing basic civil protections. For the second point, I want to talk about how cities need to stop penalizing survival and instead fund affordable housing and safe alternatives like parking programs and sanctioned encampments for these people as well. And the last thing I want to talk about is reform law enforcement practices, which is training and trauma-informed care. Officers should also work alongside social workers and healthcare workers to respond to homelessness with empathy and problem solving, not criminalization. The second thing I want to talk about is the bail system. You can see my three main points there. To get into the first one, the current bail system punishes people for being poor, and eliminating cash bail for nonviolent offenses ensures that someone's freedom doesn't depend on their bank account. The second point I want to talk about is that once cash bail is removed, we need strong pre-deal services in place. Agencies that send court date reminders, often check-ins, and connect with people support is really important. Washington, D.C. also has shown that this works over 90% of the time of people return to court within needing to post bail without needing to post bail. And the third point, to build public trust, the system must be transparent, releasing data on who is detained and why. Helps ensure fairness and correctness bias. We don't need to share success stories to counter the myth that bail reform needs more crime, because it doesn't. And then for the third point, the first part within that section is supervisor fees are hidden punishments, which is really important. People already struggling financially shouldn't be burdened with monthly payments just to stay out of jail. For the second point, probation should be rehabilitation, not profit. I think that's like the main thing behind that point. Private probation companies often charge excessive fees and impose conditions beyond court orders. Lastly, I want to say that we also need to shorten probation periods and reward positive behavior with early termination. And then passing it out to wrap everything up and rethinking justice and poverty is Alex.
All right. Hello, everyone. Just to wrap up this presentation, to just to kind of conclude on everything that we've talked about, the U.S. legal system unfairly punishes poverty through anti-homeless laws, cash bail, and probation fees. And so these policies fail to achieve these goals. And so homelessness persists despite criminalization. And uh, pretrial detention does not reduce crime rates. And then probation system penalize rather than rehabilitating individuals. And then there have been successful models. And so in our paper, we go over this, but cities reducing homelessness through housing initiatives, states maintaining public safety without cash bail, and counties eliminating probation fees with better outcomes. And so in conclusion, legal systems can change because it was built by public policy. Justice should focus on safety and rehabilitation, not revenue collection. And lastly, poverty is not a crime. And that's it. So thank you.